It's my extreme pleasure to introduce Provost Ariane Schauer, Dr. Ariane Schauer, who will be moderating our event tonight. She is one of the university's greatest leaders and role model in leadership to not only her students, but to those who have the opportunity to work with her. Please join me in greeting Dr. Ariane Schauer.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much. I want to welcome you all to Marymount California University and our Excellence in Leadership series. Our mission at Marymount includes developing the potential of our students to lead lives of leadership and service. And that is why we continually strive to complement our curriculum with so-called real-world learning experiences. This leadership series is really one aspect of that, to learn from community leaders, to learn from role models, and we're very privileged to have these fine panelists with us this evening. There are two Excellence in Leadership events this semester. One is tonight on nonprofit leadership, and one will be on November 11th, where we'll be talking about public service leadership, so related themes for sure. We're very fortunate to welcome these five panelists. Dee Dee Hicks, President and CEO of the Volunteer Center of the South Bay. Mike Lansing, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Los Angeles Harbor. Janet Levine, Development Consultant. Mary Silverstein, Executive Director of the Harbor Community Benefit Foundation. And Michael Rouse, Vice President for Diversity, Philanthropy, and Community Affairs at Toyota Motor Sales USA. Please welcome our panelists. So the format for the evening is a moderated discussion about leadership and will include, hopefully, deep pearls of wisdom that we can all go home with. We'll talk about some key turning points in leadership and some of the challenges and opportunities that face us now in the 21st century here. So let's begin with each panelist telling us a little bit about what you do and perhaps a story of leadership, a personal anecdote about some turning points, some kind of story that stands out in your own story, in any order you so wish.
Since I have the microphone.
That's one way.
Hi, well, first I just want to thank you very much for including me in this delightful event. This is such an amazing campus. It's really a privilege to be up here and to enjoy this magnificent view and just the folks in general who are here on campus. My name's Mary Silverstein, and I'm with Harbor Community Benefit Foundation. We are a very new nonprofit based in San Pedro. The board of directors first sat down in May of 2011, and I was hired in December of that same year. So we're kind of the new kid on the block. Our organization exists because of the need for environmental justice. We are the very fortunate recipients, essentially, of the funds from a settlement fund when the port was expanding very, very rapidly, and the local community gathered together with the leadership of Natural Resource Defense Council, NRDC, and actually held the port to accountability to finally give back to the community. And so I'm very fortunate to be their first executive director and to be involved in that process. A big turning point in my life, I suppose, was knowing that you can make a difference even really small ways. When I was in my undergraduate studies in Alaska, we had what was called a chancellor's competition, and we were all given the task to come up with a proposal of something you could do on campus. And the proposal had to identify a problem and then come up with a solution. My idea at the time was really out of frustration. I thought that they should redo the cafeteria plan and make it so that you could actually purchase cards as opposed to coming in with cash all the time. And so I designed a card, and I came up with and handed the design off, and it had our school logo on it, and asked the chancellor to put it into play, and they did. So it was just a really simple task, looking back on it now, but it was something that made a difference, and it was put into play, a very long time ago. So that's just a simple story. I'll hand it off.
Thank you. I'm Dee Dee from the Volunteer Center. I have been there as head of the Volunteer Center for 26 years, and I still look forward to going to work every day. I had the privilege of being a stay-at-home mom and doing tons of volunteer work. But after my youngest graduated from high school, I thought, well, I want to see what the real world is like. And so I was able to first go to Bullock's, and I didn't know what to do. I really hadn't ever worked outside of the home. But I went to Bullock's and became a wardrobe consultant for executive women. And I don't like to shop. And so consequently, it wasn't one of my favorite things, but I at least got my foot in the door for work outside of the home. And a friend said, oh, the Volunteer Center is looking for someone. You apply. And I said, well, it said you have to know how to write grants, and I didn't know how to write grants. And she said, apply anyway. So out of 75 people, I applied. And as I said, the rest is history. The Volunteer Center had a budget when I came of about $140,000 a year. We now have a budget of about $2 million, and the value of our services to the community are valued to be in the vicinity of $75 million a year. And so it's been a wonderful ride and a lot of fun. So many times I've been asked, how did you get into the volunteer field, and how did it become such a part of your life? And it all happened when I was a little girl, about 10 years old, and I stood in the backyard of our farm and watched the neighbor's house on the hill about a mile away burn to the ground. Everything in it burned. I felt so sorry for them, but by that night, the farmers around, the women around, had gone into their own homes, and the farmer family was going to move into the wood house. So the farmers came and took the wood out of their wood house, and the women went down into their basements and got food they had canned for their own families. They gave them tables, chairs, blankets, bedding, clothes from their own homes. Well, it was a wonderful way to see America at its best and volunteering at its best. And so from that day forward, I thought, volunteering is good. And so it became a lifetime thing with me, and developed a passion for it. And as I said, 26 years at the Volunteer Center, 26 happy years. Most of the time, I mean, there are times there are challenges, but most of the time it's great. So I'll pass this on now. Oh, wait, I have to tell you one thing. I happen to be back in Iowa. Your turn soon. I happen to be back in Iowa last September, and I was receiving an award from the high school alumni group, and I told this story. And then I went back to sit in the front row of, this was done in the high school gym, and I went to sit in the front row. And a man behind me with gray hair, very gray hair, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "The house you saw burned down belonged to my grandfather." This is what a small town does. But that was amazing because, that was 70 years ago. And to have something like that connect was very special.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Rouse. I'm Vice President of Diversity, Philanthropy, and Community Affairs for Toyota Motor Sales USA in Torrance. It is the national headquarters of Toyota's sales and marketing operation, although there are many Toyota companies in the United States, and we're the oldest one, but not the only one. So I'm an LA guy, was born in downtown Los Angeles. I graduated from Inglewood High in '68, attended UCLA for my bachelor's degree, and got a teaching credential at Berkeley and my MBA at Cal State Dominguez, so it's all been around here. And I have been with Toyota for 32 years. So I started there in 1981 and kind of just moved up the ranks. And it's pretty typical at Toyota that most of your jobs last about 2 to 3 years, which was my case until, and in terms of important decisions in one's life, I think maybe the most important career decision I made was the decision to seek out the job that I have now. Because you have to understand, at Toyota, we're in the car business, and the movers and shakers, the people who want to rocket to the top, always want to be on the vehicle side of the business. We need a lot of support functions, so we have a legal department and an accounting department and HR and all of that. But those are considered support functions, and what I do is considered a support function. And so when I was in my early 50s, I made the decision that I wanted to do this. And I think part of it is, philanthropy, it's not innate in most people. It's something that you have to learn. I think it's a uniquely American gift to the world. And I learned it from my mom and dad. My dad started a fundraising support group for the City of Hope when he was in high school in 1948, and the group that he started with another woman still exists today. And I grew up watching my parents raise money for the City of Hope, and so and worked with them, at the events that they did. So it was kind of in my bloodstream, and I knew that the person who had occupied the job was on her way out. So I sought the position out. And I knew that to some extent it was going to take me out of the mainstream of the business, but I was ready to do it. And the great thing for me is that when I took the position in 2002, Toyota was entering into a 5-year period of incredible success and profitability, as everything that was going on in the economy up until 2008. And I had a boss who, and we'll probably talk about this kind of stuff later on, he is what I considered a great leader, because he just gave me the latitude to do what I wanted to do. And up until taking over this job, we did a lot of buying tables at events and things like that. We had a few programs, but because of the success of the company and the ideas that flourished in my department and under my leadership we were able to do, Toyota built over the course of the last 10 years, I think, a fairly substantial image in the community as being a good corporate citizen. So in 2010, when Toyota went through its recall crisis, and it was the lowest point that Toyota had experienced in our 57 years in the United States, when it came time to rebuild the image of the company, the first place all eyes turned was to my department, because we were the ones doing, building, working diligently every day, focusing on the company's image of giving back, of being a good corporate citizen. And there's so many programs that I could talk about and things that, in ways that we have made a difference, and we've supported the Volunteer Center, we've supported the Boys and Girls Club. And there's program after program after program. But my proudest accomplishment is in the last year, I've had no fewer than 6 corporate managers and vice presidents come up to me and say, when you retire, I want your job.
Thank you. My name is Janet Levine, and I am a fundraising consultant, and I feel almost like the mirror image of you. I was a fundraiser for many years, and like most fundraisers, I think the longest job I ever kept was 2 years. So I didn't do that. And I did not grow up in a culture of philanthropy. I grew up poor. We were recipients, but I certainly never knew about fundraising. And I fell into fundraising after years in for-profit sales and marketing, and answered an ad in the LA Times that said, sell the School of Engineering, USC, not UCLA, to businesses. And I thought I could do that. I know how to sell. And so in 1988, I started working at USC. And I moved around a lot. I worked at USC, at the University of Oregon, at El Camino College here, at Pasadena City College, and ended up as a vice president of advancement at Cal State Dominguez, another thing that we have in common. And then we got a new president, and 80% of all vice presidents of advancement don't survive the first year of a new president. They want their own person. And I thought, it's time for me to hang out my own shingle and do what I've always wanted to do, which is consult. So for the last 6 years, I work with nonprofits of all sizes and all shapes, mainly helping them to increase their capacity, What does that mean? That means helping them to fundraise, helping them to build boards that are stronger, more involved, more engaged, helping their staff to understand what their roles are, helping them to communicate better with the community. And I feel like I died and went to heaven because it's the best job I could ever have. I get to give back with a lot of organizations and do a lot of things. So it's been really wonderful. And as I've been sitting here trying to think about a turning point in my life, I thought, I am someone who never learns from success. Success just sort of seems like the thing that you do. I always learn from failure, and I've learned a lot in my life, which might tell you something. And I think about, I was very successful in my career in large part because I had no vision that I could fail. I just had a complete failure of imagination that I couldn't do something. So I decided I was going to be a fundraiser. I started pretty high up the food chain because, of course, I could do that. And so I think I was pretty arrogant. And I thought, I know what the answers are. I know what to do. And I vividly remember being brought into an organization to be a change maker and to change the way we did things. And I came in sure that I knew the answers. What I didn't realize was that a true leader, because I thought of myself as a leader, is someone who brings people along with them. I didn't think that was so important. I had the vision. I knew what had to happen. I knew what was right. So I pronounced what we were going to do, and I jumped on my horse, and I grabbed my flag, and I marched off thinking that everybody would be following me. And what I learned was in doing that, all I was a target. Nobody followed me because I hadn't done the real leadership job of convincing people and finding out what they thought the needs were and what they had to do to change things. And that was a real wake-up call to make me see that my first role is always to find out where people are and to meet them where they are, and then to find out where they want to go, and then to see if together, as a team, we can get them there.
Good evening. First, a shout out to Marymount at the Boys and Girls Clubs LA Harbor. We have a great relationship with the university. President Brophy, Susan Garman, a lot of the staff are working with us in having the students do service learning at our club sites, and it's been a great, I think, win-win opportunity for both the children we serve and the students at Marymount California University. So thank you, Marymount. You guys are awesome. Quickly, I was born and raised in San Pedro. Went to the San Pedro Boys Club when it was single gender back in the day. Lucky enough to went to school locally. Lucky enough to graduate from high school. Did my undergrad at finance degree at Cal State Long Beach, and then my teaching credential and master's in school administration at Cal State Dominguez Hills while I was teaching and coaching. So I was a teacher and coach for 19 years. And with all of that education, I think the greatest thing I learned about leadership was watching somebody who I really respected coach. It's interesting, you see a lot of different people in leadership roles, and I learned three basic things from this individual. First of all, you can have all the greatest ideas in the world, you can be the smartest person or think you are, and you can have all the charisma that you need, but unless you build a great team around you, you are going to be leading by yourself, and you're not going to be much of a leader. So building a team, watching him build a coaching staff at a level where far beyond what anybody else was doing at the time, and bringing people on that had complementary skills and the same mindset and commitment to the plan was probably one of the greatest things I ever learned about being a leader. Second of all, having high expectations. He made sure that we knew what our jobs were, had great communication, made sure that every day there was a plan. We met before practice, we met after practice. We made sure we took care of the kids first. And again, that wasn't the norm when I was coaching back in the day. And lastly, was serving more. He believed that while other people were getting the top 10 or 12 athletes, that, we could have 40 or 50 kids on the team. That means we're going to have to work harder. That means we're going to have a bigger staff of volunteers, and we're going to have to make sure that we meet the needs of every kid, maybe in different opportunities. But why have 10 or 12 having a great experience when it could be 30, 40, or 50 kids? And I think in nonprofit work, that's one of the limitations, is that we have low expectations at times, and we don't think we can serve more. We limit ourselves by not raising that bar and expecting more out of ourselves. So I think I probably went to school for about 20 years after high school, part-time and full-time, but I think I learned more from this gentleman coaching than I learned in all the classes and all the seminars and other things I took. So good luck, students. You guys are awesome. I know there's a leadership program and department here, so congratulations, Marymount.
Thank you for these candid answers. We hear a lot of passion. We hear a lot about learning. I think we hear a lot about determination and making things happen. And we're hearing a lot about having other people on board and having the right people around you and such. And that's a theme I want to pursue this evening a bit. Our graduate students have been studying various leadership attributes, including credibility, preparation, symbolism. And one of the recurring themes in the leadership program has been how to stay in touch with the constituents' voices. How do we ensure that we hear the voices of the constituents and not just our own voices or the yes men around us? But how do you find that you stay grounded and that you hear the voices and ensure that they reach you?
I come out of sales and I come out of fundraising, so the most important thing is dialogue. I get really frustrated when people ask me, what's the pitch? I don't think that you need to pitch. I think you need to have conversations that need to be very open, and the more that you can ask really good leading open questions so that people have the opportunity to speak, the more that you can really learn and hear.
I think in my case, I will tell you without question, and I'm one of the most opinionated SOBs you'll ever meet. I have firm ideas about a lot of things, and I don't hesitate to express them, but then I will always say to my group, okay, shoot it down, tell me why I'm wrong. And about half the time, they have a better idea. And so as a leader, you have to understand. A guy at Toyota, long retired, but I never forgot when he said this. And he was fairly high up in the organization. He said, I'm a lumberjack. He said, my job is to cut down the trees that get in the way of people's view and that prevent my people from achieving their objectives. And so all the ideas, all the great stuff that we do at Toyota, they're not my ideas. They come from the people who are part of my group, stuff that they've wanted to do for a long time. And so I find it's my job, again, to cut down the trees that might be in the way of their accomplishing what they want to do. And when you liberate people to get stuff done and give them, in my case, the latitude of the resources of a company like Toyota, when we get behind something, there's no limit to the great things that you can do. So I think one of the keys to leadership is just being a good listener more than anything else, and listen to the great ideas that your people have. And then when they start, I also, Ronald Reagan is one of my heroes, and he said, there's no limit to how far a man can go as long as he doesn't care who gets the credit. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
Well, there are so many attributes that a leader needs, and perhaps one is not being arrogant. And I think that's what you're saying too. Our ideas aren't always the best. We have to listen, and that's the only way to bring the team in. If your team isn't going to follow, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. So the secret is to figure out ways that your particular team will be able to accomplish the goal that you feel so passionate about. How to bring that passion out from them. Certainly, inclusive is one way. Other ways would probably be giving them the recognition they need. I think that is one of the main things when you need a team to follow. Give them the recognition. Don't take all of the good vibes for yourself that come in from the community. Share them. Make everyone feel important. I can't really stress that enough. And hire people that have the ability, tremendous ability. Don't be frightened by it or intimidated by it. Hire the people with the most ability, because they will come through if you are a leader who is willing to listen to them and accept their ideas, as you're just talking about, as well as your own. I think, though, that you probably have more than 50% of the time that they take your ideas. Leadership is a wonderful thing. And if you have the passion and can articulate the vision for your organization in that passion, the sky is the limit as to what your people, your team can do.
Get out from behind the desk. Get out in the community and get to know your community. I have a really young staff, and I had one staff member who was sharing with me how frustrated he was because we're so new. There's a lot of pieces that we're just putting together. We have a whole new social media campaign, and that's another thing, is my staff's very high tech, and so they're reaching out to a lot of the stakeholders in ways that I've never heard of, because anyway, so don't be afraid to get out there and use that technology to your advantage. But get out from behind the desk and get to those community meetings and network and listen to what the pulse is within your community, and foster those ideas of your young staff. When they come up with an idea that seems like it's a little far-fetched, dig a little deeper. There might be some gem there that might be a little bit raw because of the way they presented it, but it could be an idea that, if it's fostered properly, can take you to a whole new level.
I think listening is there's different ways to listen and there's different ways to observe. So a couple of quick correlations. I was, we heard when I started at the Boys and Girls Club that there needed to be a teen center for older kids. We went out and we interviewed a bunch of them. We had a summit and brought them into a room and said, well, what are you missing? And they said, we need our own space, we need our own programs, we need things for us. So we built a teen center. And one day I'm sitting, 3 years after that teen center, I'm sitting at my desk on the corner of our building, and I'm looking out the window at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I see a bunch of our teens walk into school. Kids that I knew were participating every day in our program. They were playing basketball, they were good athletes, but they're going to school at 11 o'clock, which obviously is problem number one. So I went back to my teen center director and I said, let me know how many of these seniors that we have that are coming every day, how many are graduating in June? And found out that even though we built a brand new teen center, had a full education program, education support program, along with dance, music, sports, recording studio, all these things, that less than 50% of my seniors are going to graduate that year. So I had to listen to, wow, that's failure is about as bad as it can be, because it doesn't make any difference if you help them get to 18, but if they have no options at 18, what have you done? You've just delayed the inevitable. At the same time, I was on the school board for LAUSD. Thankfully, I'm not anymore. And I was hearing at the same time that, children of color in the high schools weren't getting their A through G classes that they needed, not just to graduate from high school, but to be eligible for college. And I'm going, how can that be? I mean, a large majority of the kids are children of color. I mean, who's taking these classes? But when I found out that we had 50% or less than 50% graduating. And I brought a group of people together. I said, we have to do much more than we're doing. And we built a program called College Bound that was going to give daily mentoring support in a college pathway. As we started working with the local high schools, we found out the thing that I didn't think was true, that I heard earlier, was true, that these children of color weren't getting the classes they need. Not only not the classes, maybe the class to graduate, but not to be eligible to go to college. And so we had to change our whole mindset of not just building a program, but we had to change the mindset of the people who were the leaders of education as a Boys and Girls Club, which, you know, that had a whole nother issue of listening to my board saying, what are we doing helping kids get to college? That's not what a Boys and Girls Club does. Sometimes you have to listen and then not listen, and do something different, and listen to what's in your heart, and knowing that, you know, if a kid's, you know, maybe not the same color as me, doesn't mean he or she shouldn't have the same opportunities that I did growing up in this community. So, you know, I talked to you about seeing, observing a coach who had a whole different mindset about being a leader. You take data, you take what other people are bringing forward, you have to take all these things in. I just pulled out 2 recent articles in the newspaper about foster children and the difficulties they have going to college. The poverty rate in LA being 27%, higher than any other county in the state of California. You take all these things together, the realities of the lack of education. A lot of the parents have the data that shows that in Wilmington, 59% of the adults over 25 do not have a high school diploma. You take all that information and you've got to say, okay, you can throw your hands up and give up, or you can change the cycle, and that means you're just going to have to work that much harder, and you're going to have to give that more opportunities, and you're going to have to break some expectations that, or lack of expectations that people have, and that's going to take a lot of extra work. So if you're going to go in a nonprofit world, you have to make a decision. Do you want a job, or do you really want to make a difference? And if you want to make a difference, you better be willing to listen to a lot of different things and make some tough decisions sometimes that other people aren't going to like, but hopefully in the end you've done your job.
Thank you for sharing these examples of the need to listen internally and externally, and it sounds like not just listening to people, but listening to the data as well, and asking those questions as you go. What do you see as challenges that are specific to the not-for-profit sector?
I think the biggest challenge to the not-for-profit sector is something you alluded to, is that sense of scarcity, the feeling of poverty. I work with a lot of different organizations, from very small, all-volunteer organizations to very large universities. And what is amazing is that sense that we don't have enough, we can't do anything because we don't have enough, and changing that philosophy, instead of keep looking and talking about what we can't do, and getting people to think about what we can do, what we can accomplish with what we have, I think is the most important thing that we can do in the nonprofit sector.
I work in the profit sector, but I do sit on 6 nonprofit boards plus a couple of advisory boards. And I think as one who has to certainly read letters of request and so forth, I think the biggest thing facing the nonprofit sector, now if you look at what's gone on in the economy in the last number of years, business has gone through a restructuring. The nonprofit sector needs to go through a restructuring. There are too many organizations out there doing the same thing. It's like I get people coming in talking about, we focus on literacy in the inner city. I go, really? Have you talked to the people who were in here yesterday? They're doing the same thing that you're doing. There aren't enough dollars out there to support the infrastructure of these organizations that are doing the same thing. And so I'm afraid that the nonprofit world, before it's going to advance, has to contract, because that will allow it to be managed more effectively and have fewer of its resources going towards supporting people doing the work, and I think allow them to focus like a laser, as they say, on the things that need to be done.
I totally agree with what you just said. Kind of along that line, there's another thing too. The nonprofit sector has to be willing to change what they are doing. For example, at the Volunteer Center, when I came, our main purpose was to recruit volunteers for nonprofit organizations. Well, times change. People now have computers, and they can get volunteer opportunities from computers. Nonprofits can send things to the newspapers and have them published, and there was a time when that wasn't as available, and the Volunteer Center's Can You Help column was a big thing. But as times changed, it was clear that volunteer recruitment was not enough. We needed to do something more. And so we went more into the hands-on field and started saying, where are the real needs in the community that someone else isn't meeting at this time? And one thing was literacy backpacks for kids. And we started out small, even sewing the bags that we put the articles in to give to first graders to give them a good start, and in the very disadvantaged areas, things they could use in school and they could learn at home with these things. Well, now we do 5,600 of those every September. A wonderful program. But then when we delivered these backpacks to the schools and read to the kids, we found that a lot of them were hungry. And so we started our Food for Kids program, where we are feeding hungry kids, sending food home on Fridays for families because the kids were coming to school hungry on Monday morning. These are just a couple things, but they were big changes for us. And now we send food home to 115 families every week. This is a big thing for us. But if we had stayed, and we have 10 programs altogether, and I won't go into all of those and bore you with them. But the point is that we have to be ready and willing to change and find the needs that someone else is not doing. And again, I want to say the sky's the limit what you can do, but we have to be flexible.
I completely agree with you, Michael, about there needing to be a contraction. And something very unique that our foundation is doing, especially through our healthcare grants, is requiring the recipients of our funds to work together. So we've convened these quarterly grantee meetings where each recipient has to come, be in a room, talk about what they're working on, and find a way to create synergy. And it's worked out marvelously. In fact, we've already done 2 health fairs that have brought a lot of people together, and another shout out to Marymount because your students came and helped us put that friendly face in San Pedro that didn't exist in the past. I think another huge change is going to be that a lot of nonprofits don't have strategic plans, and they don't have a succession plan. So they have some key person who's at the top that's relied upon 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later, they're still there. And there's not an effort made to develop the leadership from within and to empower those people who are second and third and fourth in command to take over. And that shift has to happen.
Let's keep building on that theme. As we talk about continuity and leadership development, what advice would you have on how we can develop the leadership of those who may take the organization to the next step? What tangible steps do you see or are you taking?
Again, I think if one of the things is that organizations can't be centered on one person. I truly feel that you have to have a breadth of leadership that, 2 things, if the supposed person on top leaves willingly or unwillingly for different reasons, that the organization can obviously continue. But beyond that, you have to have opportunities for people to take on leadership roles that maybe are going to be a stretch, whether it's programmatic leadership, whether it's administrative leadership, whether it's giving them more responsibilities than they're willing to take. And oftentimes, that's because of self-doubt. You know, I'll give two examples. When I was on the school board, I knew one of my staff would be a great chief of staff, but she goes, there's no way I can be a chief of staff. You know, I just don't have that capacity. And, you know, just continually giving different opportunities for her to take on projects and showing in different areas that she could do the job at so many levels. When it came time, I said, well, you said you couldn't be a chief of staff, but you did this, you did this, you did this, and you did this. So isn't that the leadership needed in this position? And she was a Harvard grad, smart as a whip, and I didn't really do anything but just give her experiences that showed that she had the leadership. Second example is that, you know, I think leadership has to be relative. I mentioned our college-bound program. First year we ran the college-bound program, we had 30 total kids in it, and a few seniors and one went to college. But it was obvious that the person who was leading that program did not have the capacity, wasn't the right person. She could not relate to the kids. You know, when you're running a college-bound program at 4 o'clock every day, your director's making copies for 20 minutes, you know there is a definite leadership problem, because that's the time the kids need your help. So, you know, I was lucky enough to have had an alumnus from the club who was going to college away from us, knew the things that she went through as a young person, knew that she had the leadership qualities, and just, I had to convince her after a year that you need to come back. You can get your teaching credential at Dominguez, but you are the kids that we're serving every day. You can relate to their needs, and that's about 50% of this job. The rest, you are learning, and you will learn, and you will make this grow. And we went from 30 kids in the program that she's now taken over since that time. We had 1,424 or 14 in the program last year. So sometimes it's somebody in-house and that you've been developing. Sometimes just you got to be able to look around, I think, and find leadership, maybe taking a bit of a chance, but giving that person that opportunity and letting them develop as they grow.
I'd actually like to piggyback on the conversation we started before, because I think a big piece of the problem is what we fondly call founder syndrome. Everybody wants to start a nonprofit. 80% of all nonprofits in the United States are under $500,000 in operating budget. They're too small to be training leaders. Frankly, guys, they're too small to even have leaders in many, many ways. And unless we look at nonprofits as a very different type of a business model and start looking at, don't start a nonprofit because you have a great idea. Find somebody who's already doing something, join with them, partner, work together, learn together. Don't feel like you have to be a founder. Only then are we going to really have good, strong succession, because you can only have succession if you can model after successful people. And if your nonprofit is you, your secretary, and 3 board members who are your best friends, you're never going to get better than that.
I think one of the trends that's starting to scare me a little bit is the number of universities that are creating master's programs in nonprofit management. There's a woman who recently left Toyota. She was a vice president, and she went back to the University of Pennsylvania to pursue a master's degree in nonprofit management. Because I think at the end of the day, all you are, as has been stated, is you're a business, you know, and you are taking certain inputs, whether it's dollars or time or hours that people work, and you're creating a product. And I think, you know, we're now entering this era where my generation is starting to retire in large numbers. There's a lot of business expertise that's out there, people that might be looking for something to do. There's probably a lot of people out there who might happily serve as a mentor, volunteer for these organizations to help them get more business-like. Because at the end of the day, you're coming in to somebody like me, and you're trying to sell your product. And I want to know, what kind of efficacy you have as a small business, like what are your inputs and what are you putting out? How well are you doing at what you say you are trying to accomplish? And again, it needs to go through that restructuring. As has been stated, there's way too many organizations chasing after the same thing. And but I think the potential is great. The resources are out there, but I think what's required is a more business-like approach and a less, you are doing something that moves people from the heart, but you don't run it from your heart, you run it from your brain.
Exactly. The nonprofit sector is a business. Every one of our nonprofits is a business. But I like to say we're a business with a heart. And I think that most times we are. I jotted down a couple of things. Leaders listen to figure out what is in someone else's heart. And when you think about that, I think it's really true. It applies to every facet of what we do in the nonprofit sector. And Larry King said, nothing I say this day will teach me anything. So if I'm going to learn, I must do it by listening. And I think we've heard this in the panel tonight. Hearing what our cohorts have to say is so important. Another thought, concentrate on what you do well and do it better than anyone else. That's what a leader does. And then David Brinkley, the television journalist, said, a successful man, and I'd like to say or woman, is one who can lay a firm foundation with the bricks that others throw at him or her. I think that is very true. We have to have a thick enough skin to handle those bricks and then build something with them.
We have a very unusual nonprofit in that we fall under the Brown Act, which essentially means our board cannot meet in enough numbers to make a decision behind closed doors. It's very unusual for a nonprofit, but what it does for us is it makes us pretty transparent. And so one of the things that makes it so that we are able to be a little better leaders is that we literally have to put out an agenda. Within 72 hours of all of our meetings are public, even when we did our strategic plan. And what that did for us is it made it so that we could be a better leader within the community and that we could create an environment where people could come and ask questions, and we're much more accountable than usual. Another thing that's happening, it's treated more like a team sport, if you will. The nonprofits in the Long Beach and the San Pedro area have a couple of little groups that we're now part of. Both Michael and I go to the Executive Directors Roundtable in Long Beach. And what that's doing is hopefully helping us to be more collaborative and more likely to survive, as some of these nonprofits will eventually be dissolved because they can't keep up, they can't compete, they can't keep the dollars that they need to keep their doors open. But I think those collaborations are really critical. And so if you're thinking about joining the nonprofit sector, it does have a heart. It does have a lot of accountability. It's more mission driven, but if you don't run it like a business, it won't survive.
I like the image of the bricks being thrown at the leaders. Let's pursue this a little. As you think about bricks in the way or bricks thrown at leaders, can you share anecdotes of a time when you had to make a difficult decision, or when there was a seemingly unsurmountable obstacle, some sort of brick that you had to turn around and use to your advantage? How did you turn that around? I'd love to just hear real-world examples here of how that happened.
First of all, if you want to be in this for a popularity contest, you're in the wrong job, because a lot of times you're going to tick off somebody. It's not your staff or a donor or a client, because they're not always going to agree with you. But I think for us, for myself, at the Boys and Girls Club, the LA Harbor. The first one was when we were building this, this teen center. The Boys Club of San Pedro was established in 1937. So in 1999, after I'd done a bunch of research, brought people together, talked to some potential donors, talked to some board members, said, you know, it's time for us to build a teen center. We're supposed to be working with kids 6 to 18, and we have this one center that's supposed to be serving all these ages. That isn't working. The older kids aren't coming. I stopped going to the boys club when I was 12 because after that, when I turned 13, and it was all the little rugrats and me, and we didn't want to hang around with the little kids, so we just stopped coming. Hadn't changed from 68 to 99. So we had a series of meetings and discussions with the board. Everybody got on board, and then the day of the vote, probably the strongest board member said, I don't remember us talking about building a teen center. I said, wow, okay, we've been talking about this for 2 months now, how am I gonna, and he's basically, everybody kind of, bows to this one person. So I had a choice to make. I had to either decide that I was going to continue on and move the motion forward and ask the board to move on this and possibly lose this board member and a group of others, which I ended up losing 10 board members through this, or we're just going to stay the status quo and not be serving older kids. Obviously, we went with building a teen center. Now we have separate elementary, middle school, and high school centers because that's a better way to serve our kids. And now all the board is quote unquote on board. But back then, I made the decision that I'm gonna have to stand up to this and deal with the consequences that I knew were going to come once this was going to pass. So it's probably one experience of dealing with 10 bricks anyways.
I think dealing with boards is sometimes the hardest thing that you have to do, but since you had such a good example, I think the hardest thing that I ever had to do as an executive director of a foundation, of a nonprofit, was turning down a gift. It's really hard. Somebody comes at you and they want to make a gift for a particular purpose, and that purpose did not fit our mission, didn't meet what we needed to do. And my board said, but this is a lot of money. It's a big percentage of our operating budget. We have to accept this. And I spent a lot of time with my program directors and doing things and showing that the amount of money that this person was giving, which was significant, was not going to fill our need, wasn't enough money to sustain the program, which is another problem that nonprofits have. We could have lots of conversations about that. And so being able to go to the donor and say, thank you, but no thank you, we cannot accept this. We really appreciate everything that you want to do. We'd like to present something and hope that you may want to do it. In this particular case, it worked well, but I've also had cases where it hasn't worked so well, where they're angry because they want to be generous and you're saying no thank you. So that's a very difficult but important brick. Learning how to say no is as important as saying yes.
I think the same probably applies in my case as one who is on the funding side. The hardest things that we have to do is say no. We can't say yes to everybody. And so we have set up certain criteria. So certainly one way to say no to someone is that we just say we have 3 focus areas: environment, safety, and education, and what you are requesting doesn't fall into our funding area. Other times when there's an organization that may be within our funding criteria, and then it gets a little harder because then you have to look at, again, how well is the organization doing? And certainly one of the things that we'll look at is, because I was once approached for an organization, they really needed the money because without it, they weren't going to be able to meet their payroll. And so then it's, well, they're a community organization, and is their community supporting them? And if the community is not supporting them, why should I? And if I meet give them this contribution to meet this payroll, then who's going to meet the next payroll? And so those kinds of decisions are never easy. But again, it gets back to all the other stuff that we've been talking about. But now on the funding side, you're dealing with, I think, a different set of problems that those on the nonprofit side deal with. But nevertheless, they still tug at you because everybody tries to make a very compelling case, and we can't be all things to all people.
Well, I really think that ongoing, one of the main challenges is the personnel issues that come up in organizations. And everyone has them, and it's something that we can read about in the books, but when, as leaders, we surround ourselves with leaders, and everyone thinks that theirs is the best way, and that they should be able to do what they want and so forth without much oversight. This kind of thing presents challenges. And most times these are people with tremendous talent, but keeping them happy, keeping them busy with what they need to do, keeping the direction, the focus of the mission in front of them, all of this all the time. I think that's one of the main challenges. And again, we bring it on ourselves because we hire people who are leaders who are really good at what they do. But it is something ongoing, and it takes a tremendous amount of patience and of one's own leadership abilities to be able to keep a happy, functioning organization all the time.
Is that possible? Perhaps one of the bigger challenges I ever had was in a former position when I was the executive director of an affordable housing developer. Affordable housing is really, really tough, and it's even more difficult now because tax credits have changed and CRA doesn't exist anymore, and so there's really a challenge chasing after those dollars. But there was a particular project that I was working on in Culver City. And if any of you are familiar with that area, Culver City really doesn't develop affordable housing. And they were sitting on a lot of money. And there was a lot of pressure from the state level because their housing element wasn't getting approved until they would finally create some affordable housing. So our organization came up with a proposal. We had a location. We had lined up all the funding for it. And we went to the first city council meeting, and we were asked to leave because they were afraid that there was going to be violence from the neighbors. They were so angry at the prospect that we were about to bring in those people. And it took months of community meetings to make people realize those people already live in the neighborhood. Those people are you. And it was a whole education process to try to explain what is affordable housing anyway and why it was such a huge benefit. But the real hard part was to get people to buy in and feel like they were invested in the project itself. And the turning point was actually a replica of an exercise I did when I was at Berkeley. At Berkeley, I don't remember what they called it, but the concept was you were creating a tabletop book that was going to go into a lobby area, and you were to negotiate what that book would look like. And it was a combination of the size and the content and the color, and each of you had different information as you walked into the room because you had different needs. And the real exercise was there were assumptions on both parts about what the other party really wanted, and they were completely wrong. And in the case of Culver City, we, for the first time ever, our organization held a charrette and let the entire community come over a series of 3 nights to help design the project. And it turned out the one thing they got the most emotional about was the color of the building. The color of the building. And when we finally let the community pick the color of the building, the fight ended.
Talk about listening, huh? We have some questions from the audience here, a whole range of questions. One has to do with organizational culture. How does leadership work in smaller organizations where the lines between roles may be less clear? And how do you go from one type of organizational environment to another?
Well, when I started 19 years ago, we were a small organization. We had eight staff. I was one of them. My second day on the job, I was putting buckets in the gym because the rain was coming through the ceiling. And that's when I figured out what the heck did I get myself into. But when you have we were a small-time organization, and sometimes it's really hard to change the mindset of those people that are helping lead the organization. And the reality is, whether it's a small or large organization, the board of directors are definitely a key to the long-term sustainability, but even the short-term determination of where you're going as an organization. And so for us and for myself, the biggest challenge was getting people to understand that we could do a lot more than we were providing at that time. I mean, we had one site, we were serving about 150 youth a day, and the mindset was that that was good enough, and that the sports leagues and just the hangout was okay. So to change the culture takes time, and you have to bring people along. You have to find advocates within your organization that are going to agree with you. And then you just have to work really, really hard, I feel, to change the mindset that, you know, the bar is right here. We can get here with a determination, a strategy, a follow-through, and bringing the right people on the bus to move this thing forward. Not staying on the sidelines and throwing rocks, like we had a lot of people doing, but being part of moving this bus forward. And it doesn't come easy. I truly think that the leadership, whether it's the CPO or executive director, you want to call it, and board leadership, has to be willing to take that on first and show by example and work harder than everybody if you're going to expect other people to step up and do the same thing. And you have to be willing, again, to let people go. If people don't agree with the commitment that you as an organization are moving towards, whether it's a board member, whether it's a staff member, whether it's a donor, because sometimes the donors want to dictate what you're going to do. If you're not willing to let people go, I don't think you're ever going to move that organization to the next level. And again, you're not going to be the most popular person in the world, but you will have an opportunity to culturally change that organization. And I think that's a real important key if you're going to change a culture.
I love Yogi Berra, and so I'd like to quote, because he said something really great about everything. And he says, if you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there, or you might get somewhere else completely. And I think that part of leadership is knowing when to steal great ideas and steal things that other people said and recycle them rather than having to build your own. And so strategic planning, I'm ambivalent about strategic planning because I think too often people look strategically and say, I want to be at $3 million when today I'm at $180,000. And I really like to looking at your capacity, planning for where you want to go, and seeing how you can get there. I'd love to be a free spirit in my life and wake up every morning and do whatever the heck I want to do. But if I want to I am a small business, I am it. And if I want to accomplish things, I have to have a plan. I have to know where I want to go, what I want to do, and how I can best utilize the scant resources that I have to get there. I think that's the same thing with nonprofits. One of my biggest challenges with my clients, who are mainly smaller, is getting them to commit to paper what they say they want to do, because they seem to be terrified that if they write it down, that something bad is going to happen, when in fact, if you write it down and if you get consensus of your board, because your board is your leadership in a nonprofit, and of the other people there, and don't forget your constituency, the people you serve, what do they really need? And you've mentioned that several times. Then and only then do I think you can have true leadership and really get where you want to go and make the changes to go from one type of an organization to another.
I don't have small organization experience, in the last 30 some odd years, so I can't really address the specific question, but I can tell you, and I think it's one of the joys of being in a very large organization. And so for some of you who are thinking about perhaps doing what I do, not going necessarily into the nonprofit world, but maybe trying to do this on, in a company environment, I like to say that Toyota produces two things, motor vehicles and vacuums. And the vacuums are created because we are a very large organization. We are a collection of companies, each with its own president. There are many opportunities because of our organization structure. So we have our manufacturing headquarters in Erlanger, Kentucky, our technical center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, a holding company in New York, and all of our plants are incorporated as separate companies with presidents reporting into the manufacturing structure. So there's all kinds of opportunities to just step into the vacuums that exist because it's a large organization and just do something. And when there's no structure that you necessarily have to report to, and then you just accomplish something because no one's paying attention to what's going on in the vacuum, I find that nobody ever says no. And my philosophy is I'm going to do this until someone tells me to stop, and no one ever tells me to stop.
I think the panelists have answered this very well, and I know we have quite a few questions to get through, so maybe we should go on with the next question.
We can do that. We can certainly do that. A couple of questions here. One of them is about the economy. How did the current economic downturn affect your resources, and what decisions did you have to make to break even?
The break-even one's not quite applicable for us yet, but the change in the economy had a huge impact on us. If you're following stories when our foundation was first created, the timing was such that it was the height of the economy for the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach. More cargo was moving through those ports than have ever before or ever since occurred. And our funding is tied specifically to the growth of the port. So the amount that was anticipated that will come into our coffers dwindled and is now about 20% of what they had originally projected. So it had a huge impact. So now we have to be really resourceful and really smart about how far our dollars can go. And our next step is to be able to point to those successes that we've created so far and start looking for other funding sources that would like to partner with us so that we can continue to do the good work that we've started.
Yes, we have been affected by the economy, no question about it. So we've had to come up with creative ideas. What are we going to do? Because as you have heard earlier, there are so many nonprofits vying for the same dollar. Well, this is an example. I heard about something they do in Dallas, and it's called the Dallas Margarita Society. And it's a group of men, 30 on the board, who raise, I believe it's over $10 million a year. I don't remember exactly how much, but I mean it's huge amounts. It's I think probably $1 million a year at least, by putting on this margarita ball, and it's all done for children to give kids things that they need. 10,000 people attend their once-a-year fundraiser. And so I had a next-door neighbor who was having a cocktail party, and I attended, and their son-in-law from Dallas was there and told me about this. So I went to our fund development director and said, Jim, we've got to do this. Will you start a group in Long Beach? Yes, I mean, we're the Volunteer Center, South Bay Harbor, Long Beach. So Jim started it, and we have 100 men who raise money for our Food for Kids as a support group, They've had the Blue Martini Ball, we call it. So for 2 years, they have brought in substantial amounts. This last year, the profit was $105,000, and I imagine it will be more next year. To us, that's a lot, but we can feed a lot more families on the weekend with that money. So because the funding went down, this is what we came up with.
I will say, and certainly the economy has affected the way we do business. We went on a lot of cost-cutting measures in 2008 or 2009, 10, 11, but I will say, and it's I think a real credit to Toyota that we went from making a lot of money to having several years in a row where we report profit at our place, Toyota Motor Sales, and in manufacturing, and we went from making a lot of money to 2 years in a row losing $1 billion a year. And even though we were losing that kind of money, they did not cut my budget. We continued to do all of our philanthropic stuff, and because they recognized the importance of what we're doing, and that was pre-recall crisis. That I think it's just a real credit to Toyota that, you look at all of our affiliates across the country, our giving is between $50 and $60 million a year when you look at the programs that we run and the money that we give away, and that budget was not cut during those most difficult times.
I don't want to belittle the importance of the economy for nonprofits, and I'm talking now in the aggregate, not for individual nonprofits, but those of you who watch TED Talks and heard Dan Pelota, those of us who know about this for a long time. For the past 40 some odd years, giving to charity has been 2% of our gross domestic product. So when the gross domestic product goes down, the amount of giving goes down, but it's still the same percentage of giving. And this goes back to the conversations that we've been having about the needs for the nonprofit sector to really rethink how we do something. We're not growing. We're not a sector that's growing. We're a trailing sector. We take the dregs of what comes. I mean, I hate to use that kind of word. And we're not very creative or consistent in what we do. I see with my clients, the biggest problem is they start and they stop, and they start and they stop, and I don't care what kind of fundraising or anything that you do, if you don't do it consistently, you're not going to have success. And if you're not looking for ways to give value back to your donors, and your donors deserve value, they're investing in you, and show them the value, keep your donors. Retention rates for donors is horrific. We lose 50% of all first-time donors every year. It's craziness. We need, as a sector, to really stop and think, what are we doing? How can we do this better? And just because we're doing good work and we're passionate about it, nobody should give to us. We need to be professional. We need to be accountable. And then, I think, regardless of the economy, things will change.
Kind of piggyback on that, in 2007, 2008, the handwriting was on the wall for us, talking to funders, talking to foundations, even individual donors. So I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve. We said, we can't be where we are today next year. We're going to have to, we're going to have to realign ourselves and reallocate. And so we cut $1 million from 2007, 2008 to 2008, 2009. But we did it in a way that we didn't close any sites. We didn't stop any of our programming as employees. We had to go to our employees and say, look, we're all going to have to take a hit. We went to our donors and told our donors, we know it's tough, but stick with us because we will be here and we will continue to provide true impact. And in the next 4 years, to be blunt, we made an early move, I think a good early business move. And the reality was, it's been brought up a couple times, investors, when I first started, investors, if you were hurting, they would give you more money than if you were doing something good. If you're doing something good, they said, no, you guys don't need help. We're going to give it to somebody else that really needs us. Today's investor is so much more savvy. They want a return on investment. I don't call them donors anymore. I call everybody investors. They want to invest in impact in making a true change. We had to continue and do a better job of showing our investors during this time that we were making impact. And we even had to increase our impact. So at a time when we were supposed to be downsizing, we were building our college-bound program. A time that we should have been finding ways to cut back, we were committing to an arts program that eventually became an arts academy. So we went down, I told you before, our budget was $300,000. We went from 5.2 to 4.2. This year our budget's back up to 5.4, because what was happening is other nonprofits were either closing or cutting way back, or Rec and Parks wasn't doing anything anymore, and people were coming to our doors, and our organization had to make a decision. Are we going to serve these people, or are we just going to say we can only serve this many? And once again, we had to go back and say, what's our commitment, what's our passion, what's our business model, and can we show return on investment? And luckily, our investors stayed with us. We grew that, and it's still a struggle every day for everybody. But I think we've made people understand that we're truly committed to this, and we're not perfect by any means, especially the executive director. But we have a really good team, and invest in this, and we will give you that return on investment.
There are plenty more questions for us to continue discussing during our reception, but in closing, I want to ask each of you one question. What trait or attribute or characteristic do you see in yourself that explains your success?
You want me to go first?
Thanks.
Sure. I think I have incredible persistence.
Luck.
I love people.
I'm going to say it's my roots. It's my upbringing. I was born and raised in Alaska in a village, and I really believe and understand the value of community. Take it very, very seriously, and it makes you feel like you're making a difference, that you're doing something that lasts, and it's completely self-serving.
Oh boy, we're in trouble. I think the one thing is that I'm not afraid to have better people than me as part of our team, whether it's a board member, whether it's a staff member. You know, you only get better by who you bring on. So I think you got to leave your ego at the door. Some people say I'm an egomaniac, but I probably am. But anyways, I think you have to be willing to bring people on and give them the limelight and let people know that they're the ones that are doing the true work. If you can't do that, then it's about you, it's not about the organization. So be willing to bring great people, better people than you, on your team.
Thank you so very much for sharing this time with us and these candid answers from your many years of experience together, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Thank you all for your attendance here today, and please stay and share questions and conversation over the reception and desserts. And thank you everyone for your participation today, and thank you Wadia for the lights and the camera equipment here. Thank you all.